we need to talk about Kenya, a country known for its stunning landscapes and a powerful economic hub in East Africa, and a nation that now is grappling with the sounds of its own government responding to its citizens with the soothing ambient noise of this.
Gunshots.
Now, that is not a scene from some historical drama about a dying republic. That is Kenya. And that is Kenya right now. A country whose recent history is marked by the bitter smell of tear gas and the chilling sound of gunfire. The promise of a new dawn, of a government for the people, feels like a distant, almost cynical memory. For many, it has been replaced by the knowing feeling that something has gone really, really wrong. So what happens when a government elected to uplift the poor starts turning on them instead? What happens when the passionate cries of a youth, of a nation are met not with dialogue, but with brute force and abductions? Well, tonight, we are going to examine the alarming signs that Kenya under President William Ruto might be following a very dangerous yet very familiar script. This isn't a path that begins with a big, dramatic coup. It's a quiet, methodical erosion of rights. One protest, one law, and one life at a time. A path that starts with the silencing of dissent and ends, well, that's the question, isn't it? Together, we will dissect this playbook piece by piece and ask the urgent question: is Kenya or is history repeating itself on Kenyan soil? The hook. It all started with a promise, and look, all the best cons actually start with a promise. A promise of a bottom-up economic transformation from a government for the hustlers, the everyday Kenyans. President William Ruto rode a wave of popular support right into power on this very platform. Yet, what happened next tells a starkly different story. Instead of relief, Kenyans were slapped with a series of punishing tax proposals in the 2024 finance bill. And these weren't just numbers or abstract figures. They were a genuine threat to survival, proposing new taxes on basic necessities like bread, mobile phone, money transfers, and menstrual products. Taxing bread, imagine. The one thing that has brought up civilization since we figured out how to mash grain together. That seems at best a bold PR move. The response? The response was not quite the quiet acceptance. It was a digital and physical uprising led by a generation that had been completely underestimated. The Kenya Gen Z. They took to social media with hashtags like Reject Finance Bill 2024, and then they went to the streets. They weren't a political party. They were a decentralized, creative, and frankly, very online movement fighting for what they saw as a monumental betrayal of their future. But the government's reaction is where our story really takes a dark turn. Instead of seeing vibrant exercise in democracy, the state's response has been increasingly severe. This is the core problem. A government that promised to listen now seems to be actively trying to mute its citizens. A president who vowed to end police brutality now presides over a security apparatus accused of unleashing it on unarmed kids. This isn't just a political disagreement, it's a full-blown crisis. Human Rights Watch has documented the authorities' crackdown on peaceful protests. A June 2025 Geopoll survey found that staggering 63% of Kenyans have a minimal to zero trust in the government's ability to address their concerns. This is a fertile ground where autocratic tendencies grow. The problem isn't just a policy dispute. The pattern It's a pattern of behavior that looks a lot like the first ominous step in the Dictators Playbook. Let's talk about the human cost, because this is where it stops being about politics. It becomes grimly personal. The true cost of this crackdown isn't measured in shillings. It's measured in human lives, actual human lives. The real agitation is found in the stories of those who paid the ultimate price for the simple act of speaking out. Consider the story of Albert Ojwang. He wasn't a politician. He was a 29-year-old teacher and a social media influencer who used his platform on X to do what citizens in a democracy are supposed to do. He criticized a high-ranking police official. And for this, he was arrested in Homa Bay County and driven nearly 360 kilometers to Central Police Station in Nairobi. He was officially booked at 9:35 p.m. and just a few hours later, sadly, he was dead. The initial police report claimed that he died from self-inflicted head wounds after hitting his head on a cell wall. Self-inflicted? Come on. Because people in police custody are famously prone to spontaneously headbutting the walls with lethal force. Then a hospital report revealed he was brought in lifeless, cold, with extensive injuries consistent with brutal assault. Blood was oozing from his head, mouth, and even his eyes. The post-mortem confirmed it. The cause of death was a severe blow to the head, which does not sound self-inflicted. Sounds, and stick with me on this complex jargon here, sounds like he was murdered. 6 people, including the station's commander, have since been charged in connection with this death. And Albert Ojwang is not an isolated case. He is a story. His story is one of far too many. Since the protest began in June 2024, the crackdown has been relentless. The state-funded Kenya National Commission on Human Rights reported that police had killed at least 63 people, and were responsible for about 87 abductions between the months, get it, of June and October of 2024. Fast forward to June 25th, 2025, when the commemorative protests were met with lethal force, with at least 16 people shot dead by the police. Just a few weeks later, on Sabasaba Day, a day historically meant to celebrate the fight for multi-party democracy, at least 31 more were killed during the protest. The total death toll? Yeah, the total death toll in this struggle has now surpassed 100 lives. These aren't just statistics. They are actual people who thought they lived in a democracy. People who decided to exercise their rights and received a bullet for their trouble. I'm not saying the police are acting like a state-sanctioned gang, but get it, when human rights groups accuse them of using military-grade weapons, wearing masks, and driving unmarked vans to hide their identities, then you're left to deduce that you are witnessing the exact opposite of to protect and serve. Let's look at the Dictators Playbook. And look, this is where it gets chilling, because none of this feels random. It feels like someone somewhere is following a script. Let's call it the Authoritarian Playbook. It's a step-by-step guide to dismantling a democracy from the inside out. And now, let's try and dissect it and walk through it. Play 1. You have to undermine the trust in the democratic process. You make sure that people feel their vote is just a suggestion and gets put directly. You make sure that people's votes are just a suggestion that gets put directly into a shredder. In Kenyan politics, this is deep cynicism that grows when the government responds to mass protests, not by addressing the root cause, but by co-opting a few opposition leaders into a unity government, effectively ignoring the actual issues that are being raised by the youth. Play 2. You attack and control the media. You know, they say a free press is the immune system of a democracy. So if you are trying to create an autocracy, what do? You have to infect the media. The killing of a blogger, Albert Ojwang, for a tweet is the most brutal example. But the attacks are broader because during the June 2025 press protest, the Communications Authority of Kenya ordered all TV and stations to stop live broadcast. Yeah, TV and radio stations were stopped from broadcasting live demos, and a directive that was later temporarily suspended by the High Court. Journalists have been shot, detained, and various of the equipments have been destroyed. Play 3. Use state violence to suppress dissent. This is the playbook's brutal and subtle centerpiece. You make protesting so dangerous that people become too scared to even try. The evidence here is overwhelming. Over 100 people killed, 100 more injured with bullet wounds. And then there is President Ruto himself, who broke his silence in July 2025 to urge police to break the legs of the protesters, or more specifically, shoot them in the leg.
So mtu ambaye anaenda kuchoma biashara ya mtu mwingine, mtu ambaye anachukua moto, anaenda kuchoma biashara ya mtu, anaenda kuchoma mali ya watu wengine. Mtu kama huyo apigwe risasi miguu, aende hospitali, akienda kotini. Yes. Yeah. Wasimuue lakini wapige hii miguu ivunjike ndio aende kotini, aende hospitali, akienda kotini. Hapana. Hatuwezi kukubali mtu ambaye anaamuka kwake anaenda kuchoma mali ya mtu mwingine, biashara ya mtu mwingine. Iko haki hapo kweli? Hapana, hiyo mchezo watu waache. Kwa hivyo mimi nataka niseme askari wasipige wananchi risasi kuwaua. Lakini mualifu, mtu ambaye amechukua kazi kwenda kuvunja biashara ya mtu mwingine, ashughulikiwe, aende hospitali, akienda kotini.
That doesn't sound like a security strategy. It sounds like something from a mob boss who says right before the screen cuts to black. Play 4. Manipulate laws to consolidate power. This is autocracy with extra steps. Instead of just breaking the law, you rewrite it so that whatever you're doing is now technically legal. It's evil genius, but in the most evil, less genius way imaginable. Because in Kenya, this has included proposals of a bill that is built or created. This has included a proposal for a bill to create a system for real-time monitoring of individual internet users' activities, granting the government expansive surveillance powers without any form of oversight. Play 5. Demonize opponents and the protesters. You have to paint them like villains. President Ruto has called protesters criminals and treasonous gangs and accused them of being funded by political rivals to overthrow his government. It's an interesting way to describe a bunch of 20-year-olds armed with smartphones and deep-seated objection to attacks on their lives. Play 6. Erode judicial and institutional independence. You weaken them. You weaken the referees, like the courts and police oversight bodies. The Kenya Independent Policing Oversight Authority, IPOA, has been heavily criticized for its slow progress when it said in May 2025 it had finished investigating at least 22 deaths from the 2024 protests, but only 2 of these cases have actually made it to court. That's not a justice system. That's a rounding error. And don't even get me started on discussing Parliament, who have been nothing but obnoxious. Play 7. Suppress civil societies. You go after the human rights groups, the watchdogs, because you can't have people looking over your shoulder when you're doing shady things. In July 2025, Martin Mavinjina, a senior lawyer with the Kenya Human Rights Commission, KHRC, was deported. The very next day, unidentified thugs and goons stormed the KHRC offices to break up a press conference on the ills that have been meted on women during the protests. Think about that. And finally, the terrifying last step. You normalize it. The police violence and the arrests, the fear, it all just becomes the new norm. The background noise of your daily life. And that is the point. That is how they intend to win. Each step on its own might feel dismissed, but put together, it's a clear and disturbing pattern. The playbook is open and the pages are turning in Kenya. But this is a very big but. Every playbook has a counter, and in Kenya, the counter move has been frankly incredible. The tipping point here is the emergence of a new powerful political force, the Gen Z rebellion. This is not your dad's protest organized by some guy in a suit with a bullhorn. This is decentralized, leaderless, and a digital flash mob for democracy. Their power comes from shared sense of outrage and an absolute mastery of their digital tools. They organize on TikTok, on X, and on WhatsApp. The app most of us use to watch videos of cats falling off furniture is now being used to coordinate nationwide civil rights movements. And you know what? It is working. A GeoPoll survey found that 65% of the people got their information about the June 2025 protests directly from social media. Their tactics are brilliantly adaptive and modern. So when the government shuts down physical protest, they organize nationwide shutdowns. They use their online survey to dox police officers accused of brutality. They crowdfund legal and medical fees for arrested and injured protesters. It's like trying to punch the internet. The government seems to be caught on the back foot, unsure of how to respond to an opponent that has no head that they could cut off. And perhaps the most significant part of this is that they have largely transcended the ethnic politics that have fractured Kenya for decades. Their fight isn't one for tribe or against another tribe. It is a fight against systemic corruption and their shared democratic future. It's a youth quake. And as one analyst put it, this protest is not an opposition-led protest. It is a citizen-led one. This resistance is the tipping point. It shows even in the face of immense state power, the will of the young, determined, and connected generation cannot easily be extinguished or subverted. They are, as one writer put it, radical Democrats with facts, memes, and a fire in their belly. And that is a hell of a combination. So, let's go back. And let's go back to the question that we started with. Is Kenya following the Dictators Playbook? The architecture of the authoritarianism is clearly being built. The attacks on media, the demonization of the protesters, and the use of state violence, or the attempts to legalize surveillance, all these are not the actions of a secure democracy. President Ruto, who campaigned on a promise to end extrajudicial killings, now oversees a security apparatus responsible for the deaths of over 100 protesters. 100 Kenyans. And has personally made statements that appear to even encourage for more violence. But this is not a story of inevitable decline. It is also a story of incredible courage, because the other side of the playbook is the resistance. Kenya's Gen Z has shown the world that a new generation of activists is rising. Digitally savvy, united across ethnic lines, and utterly unintimidated. They have rejected the old political games and they are demanding for a new social contract based on accountability and mostly justice. This is the conflict that will define Kenya's future. A struggle between a state that appears to be doubling down on force and a generation that refuses to be silenced. Will the tactics of the intimidation succeed, or will the persistent creative resistance of its youth pull the nation back from the brink of destruction? At the end of the day, We might not have the answer yet, but we hope that we will be able to succeed one of these days. You know, as Stacey Abrams once said, stoicism is a luxury and silence is a weapon for those who would quiet the voices of the people. The youth of Kenya are not being stoic and they are refusing to be silent. The question now is, who is listening? So here's the part that I ask all of you to do something. And look, awareness is a form of solidarity. So share this video, like seriously. The more the people understand what is happening in Kenya, the more international pressure there is for accountability. Follow the actual heroes in the process. The Kenyan human rights activists, the independent journalists on the ground, organizations like Kenya Human Rights Commission and Article 19 are all doing vital work. So support them. Amplify their voices. They are risking their lives, and the least you can do is risk a retweet. And now for the youth in Kenya watching this. Your digital activism has been revolutionary, but the playbook has an analog countermove that you must master next. The same system that they are using against you has a feature, not a bug, a feature. And it's called an election. They expect you to protest on the streets but not show up at the ballot box. Prove them wrong. Register to vote. It's a simple process, so long as you have your national ID or your passport at a designated registration center. It is a single yet most powerful non-violent tool you have. So organize voter registration drives with the same passion you've organized the protest in the past. Get your friends, your family, everyone you know to register. And then, when the time comes, vote this regime out. Channel that fire in your belly from the streets to your closest polling station. Finally, get in the comments. This is a global fight. Let's use this space to build a community that stands for democracy, not just in Kenya, but everywhere it is under threat. So stay informed, stay engaged, and mostly stay vigilant, because a fight for one democracy is a fight for all of them. I'm your host, DY, thanking you for being here with me on the Kenyan Week That Was, and reminding you, #OneTerm.